We will be, we'll be posting this to the website. We're going to put it onto YouTube and we'll post it to the website. So people who can't be here tonight will be able to go back and watch this. And if you want to go back and revisit any part of it, you'll have a chance to do that. So I think we're at about 6:35 and I'm going to get started because we got a lot to do tonight and we want to be respectful of your time. And again, thank you so much for being here. My name is Leah Schmidt. I am a planner with the city of Hayward. I've been with Hayward for about 8 years and I am I'm one of the co-leads on this big project that we're doing this year. A part of it is an update to the housing element, which cities, local jurisdictions, counties, cities have in the state of California, we have to update every 8 years. And so we're in the Bay Area, the 9-county Bay Area is in the newest cycle of updating our housing elements. At the same time as updating our housing element, we are updating our climate action plan, which we do have a climate action plan that's kind of interwoven throughout our general plan. And I am leading that effort with Eric Pearson and Nicole Brucky from our environmental services division. And we're being assisted by Carolyn Weissman, who was your sort of liaison going into this meeting. At the same time as updating our housing element and climate action plan, we are looking to adopt a new environmental justice element, which is the subject of this meeting tonight. So we're going to take a dive into the topic of environmental justice. What is it? And then some existing conditions analysis that our consulting team has put together and get some feedback from you and some interactive exercises. And we are also making some updates to the safety element with regard to sort of evacuation routes. And, we know with fires in the whole region that understanding safety and communicating that across jurisdictions is really important to the state and to local communities. So with that, I think, was I supposed to present on housekeeping items? Okay, I think that's it. I'm here tonight. I'm basically, if you go to the website and you send an email, you will hit me, Nicole, or Eric. If you have any questions, we're always there, and we would love to hear from you beyond this evening. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our consulting team. Eric Vaughn is the lead on the environmental justice component. He's being supported by Sarah and Gerard with RingCon, and they're sort of helping us put together this big project over the next year. With that, I'll hand it over.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leah. And thank you everyone for attending this workshop tonight. We're very excited to have you here and to gather your perspective on a range of topics related to environmental justice. So we have a lot to unpack, so I'm going to keep some of this short and sweet. When it comes to the agenda, we will have some housekeeping items, a couple of technical recaps, especially to refamiliarize everyone with Zoom and eventually with mural boards if you have not had experience with that. We will also have welcome and introductions because we would love to know who is in the audience tonight. And we will go into more of the technical concepts. So what is environmental justice? What is included in environmental justice element? How do we identify environmental justice communities? And then we go into some of the details for the data we've collected for the existing conditions in Hayward, particularly when it comes to food access, health demographics, etc. And for each of those topics, we will have a mural board activity and a chance to get your input. So with the housekeeping items, just a couple simple reminders. All of you, I'm sure, have experienced 1 or 2 workshops or at least a few on Zoom as well. But please remember, technology happens. Please be flexible and patient. We are here to help. As you will see, I am named tech support. Though I am Sarah Howland, I am here tonight to help with tech support for live assistance. Just send a chat to me directly or to everyone. Either way is totally fine. And please remember to mute yourself when not speaking. Just general habit of us having conversations. We will have opportunities for you to participate with the mural boards, but if you are a little less tech savvy, you have opportunities to use the chat and to speak out. So we ask that you do mute yourself when you are not speaking. And during the mural board activities, one person speak at a time. So with that, I will give our first tech recap. So many of you may be familiar with Zoom, but it always helps to have a little bit of a reminder of what that toolbar at the bottom of your screen can provide, especially when Zoom has changed their settings once again. So as you see here, you can hit this button here to mute or unmute yourself. As I asked, if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. You also have the opportunity to turn your video on or off here. You also can send a chat. You'll be sending a chat to everyone, so please be courteous with your chats, please. And also, if you would like the opportunity to speak, you can unmute yourself, or if you prefer, or we'd prefer, you'd be able to use the reactions to raise your hand, and then we'll have the opportunity to unmute you. And then if at any point in time, like life happens, so if you need to leave this meeting at any point in time, you can hit the end button here and you will click to leave the meeting. Sometimes there are some issues with being able to see different parts of the screen to know where the PowerPoint is or when people are talking. So feel free to change these settings on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Also, since I mentioned before, we wanted to get to know who is in the audience with welcome and introductions. We would like to get to know you better. Please participate in our poll. I'm going to launch it now, but also if you'd rather participate in the poll and or chat, we have a couple of options for you to be able to provide your name, the organization you represent, if applicable, your connection to Hayward. So with that, I will launch our poll. Is everyone seeing the poll okay to participate?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes.
Wonderful, getting some participation. Sorry, there's always that little bit of tech concern. So it looks like there's a little bit of a split. Still have a little bit more time to allow for some more participation because we have about half at the moment. But a mix of mostly people who live in Hayward and a division between people who work or go to school in Hayward and those who do not. More than 10 years, that's wonderful, is the most common category for number of years living in Hayward. A split for renting and owning. More single family homes, and a range of representation. Awesome. So I'll keep this open for just a little bit longer. So we're about to hit the 2-minute mark. A little longer. Thank you for participating. I'm going to end the poll now. Also feel free to continue using the chat if you want to, for introductions or for getting to know, getting to ask us questions during this meeting. So with that, I will pass it off to Eric Vaughn.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Okay, I represent the lecture portion of today's program, so I'm just going to try and get through some content just to frame the conversation and give you some information that we've uncovered as we've tried to assess existing conditions in the city. So just to sort of start at the high level and before we zoom in, we'll talk about environmental justice as defined by the state. And the state of California in the past few years has adopted this definition of environmental justice. It's very similar to the federal, than the national definition. But here in California, it's specifically the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So at the highest of levels, this is what's meant when the state refers to environmental justice through policy, law, and so forth. Next, please. As Leah mentioned, the city is in the process of updating some of its general plan. And the city's general plan represents its collective vision for the future. It provides a blueprint for achieving that vision through goals, policies, and objectives. And there's several pieces of a general plan. It's a very large document. And there's different pieces. It's organized by topics. There's topics for things like, as Leah mentioned, climate action is one that we're seeing more and more of, but there's the more traditional ones like transportation, housing, and safety. Leah mentioned that city is updating its safety element, and that's concerned with things like natural hazards. So the environmental justice element is actually the newest element that's required to be in a general plan in California, which is really exciting. And environmental justice elements actually came about through grassroots, people who are passionate about the topic. That's why it came into be a law. It's a very recent law. So in the past few years, they're the first environmental justice elements across the state. It comes from Senate Bill 1000, SB 1000 from 2016. So the purpose of an environmental justice element is to define goals and policies for what's termed as disadvantaged communities in Hayward. And we'll get to that definition, disadvantaged communities, in a moment. But the three sort of major components of an environmental justice element, or its purpose, is to reduce unique or compounded health risks, promote civil engagement in public decision-making processes, and prioritize improvement in programs. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the term disadvantaged communities, and so this is the terminology that's used when we talk about environmental justice in the state of California. And there's three pieces that inform how those are defined in the state. So the first is using a tool called CalEnviroscreen, and there will be a lot of talk about CalEnviroscreen tonight. CalEnviroscreen is a set of metrics that together are intended to give planners, people, communities an idea of the environmental justice issues in different places. Another aspect that we look at is where low-income communities are located. And finally, it's the local context and the community engagement, more of the intangibles, the things that wouldn't necessarily be represented in data. And this is one of the reasons we like to have community workshops, is because we can't get that information from a desk. That comes from people, that comes from the people who live in places. So these are the three things, and together that helps us inform how we look at disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a map that shows how CalEnviroscreen has ranked parts of the city of Hayward. You're seeing numbers here. These are percentiles. So you can think of them as kind of a grade as it relates to across the state of California. So every neighborhood in California is through CalEnviroscreen, which I'll get into what goes into it in a second. But it gets this overall grade, a percentile rank. So the higher the number, the poorer the performance. So the higher the number, that means, so if it's 50, if the number is 50th percentile, it means that that community is right at the mean performance across the state. And if it's a lower number, it means it's outperforming. Let's say it's a percentile of 10, which you can see at the very far eastern part of the city. That's in sort of the 0 to 10 percentile range. That means that it's outperforming 90% of communities across the state. If it's in the 90th percentile, it means it's underperforming. So there's and 10% of the communities. So the oranges represent sort of the poor performance. The yellows represent sort of mean average, and then green represents sort of better performance. So as we can see, there's a trend in the city, generally speaking, going from west to east. Yeah, and we'll get into the reasons for that. That's kind of the purpose for today's discussion. We'll get into some of the drivers of that. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so CalEnviroscreen is an index. So that means it's the result of a number of different metrics that together inform the overall ranking. And it's got this weighting scoring system to put those numbers together. But at a very high level, there's 2 buckets. And then within those 2 buckets, there's an additional 2 buckets. So 4 buckets total. So on one hand, you have the pollution burden of a community. And the types of burdens are organized above ground and below ground. Easiest way to think about it. So pollution exposure is what's in the air, okay? And you can see the list here, things like ozone, particulate matter, diesel particulate matter, and then there's stuff below ground as well. And that's like things happening with groundwater, hazardous waste, solid waste, impaired water bodies, things like that. Okay, so those are some of the metrics on that side. And on the other side, there's the population characteristics. So there are population sensitivities. That's things, in this case, it's things like health outcomes. All right, so number of trips to the emergency room related to asthma, heart attacks, and low birth weight infants. These are the metrics that went into CalEnviroscreen. Of course, there are many metrics that you could use, but these are the 3 that they elected to use to sort of represent the overall picture. And then there's just standard socioeconomic factors, low income, we talked about that, linguistic isolation, poverty, unemployment, education level, things like that. So when all these things come together to determine a CalEnviroscreen percentile, and to really understand, okay, these are percentiles that the city have. Well, there's unique reasons why it ranks the way it does overall. So to really understand what's going on, we like to go in and look at some of the individual metrics to see, well, what are the reasons? What are the reasons that are driving, injustice in this case, in certain places, and in other places, relatively high scores. So yeah, so we're going to get into this a little bit on the next slide. But just to give an overall picture, I talked about 2 buckets, right? Pollution burden and population characteristics. Well, one of the interesting things about Hayward is there seems to be a bit of a split between what's going on. And it turns out that there's only one really census tract that ranked above the 75th percentile. So ranked relatively high with respect to pollution burden. And that was the western part of the city. On the other hand, the census tracts that ranked above the 75th percentile, so relatively high for population characteristics, and again, it's things like health outcomes and socioeconomics, were in Central and South Hayward, more or less. You can see it's not all of those neighborhoods, but the neighborhoods that ranked high were in that part of town. So kind of interesting that they're split. And that's actually the primary reason why overall there were no parts of the city that ranked above the 75th percentile overall. And when the state defines environmental justice communities, it looks for CalEnviroscreen scores, overall scores that are over the 75th percentile. So there were no areas in Hayward that qualified per that definition. All right. Okay, so first topic. So wanted to talk about this, kind of interesting in terms of sensitive population. So citywide, there were some pretty high percentile rankings for these 3 metrics. So asthma is ER emissions. There's 2 ways to look at asthma. There's the sort of the caseload, the number of children who have been diagnosed with asthma, or number of people diagnosed with asthma. And then there's the more urgent version of the metric, which is people who go to the ER with problems related to asthma. And so with respect to that, relatively high ranking citywide, 94th percentile. And the same with heart attacks. So ER admissions related to cardiovascular issues fairly high, 87th percentile citywide. And low birth weight infants, also high. So this is, across CalEnviroscreen, this is one of the things that sort of was noticeable in terms of how the city was performing in some of these metrics. Okay, next slide. Right. Okay, so we're going to do some mural stuff now, just to talk about this a little more. Great.
Yep. Thank you, Eric, for giving us like that technical background, understanding like these beginning steps of like what it takes for defining environmental justice. It can be very technical. And so we really want to get to that like lived experience. So we have a few mural board activities tonight. We will see how this goes. Not all of you will be familiar with mural boards. That's completely okay. Wanted to give a little bit of a recap, just making you all feel a little bit more comfortable getting started. So if you look when we start the mural board, you will have on your left-hand side this toolbar, and you can use it to either add a Post-it note, add a shape, add an icon. So example, you could do like a star if you agree with something someone says. You can add a picture technically if you'd like, or you can draw. Please, once again, remember to be respectful. And then another issue that people tend to have with mural boards is the zooming in and zooming out. So apologies, getting a little bit of a technical difficulty on my end. Just give me 1 second. Apologies on that. So if you are on a smartphone or an iPad or something that has more of a trackpad instead of a mouse, I highly recommend that you like change your settings depending on whether you're like me on a computer right now using a mouse, recommend the mouse mode, or using the trackpad mode. So that helps you a little bit with the zooming in and zooming out. Also, once you're in the board, you are able to use this icon to move the sticky note, or you can use this pencil to write on one of those like Post-it note sticky notes. Also, you're able to increase or decrease the size, or you're able to use the corners to increase or decrease the size of your Post-it notes. So highly recommend start by clicking a sticky note and then being able to use one of the following tools in order to write on the Post-it note. Also, once again, just a little bit of recap on Zoom. If you're having any difficulties with the mural board, and we really truly want your participation, if you're having an issue, you're not comfortable, you have questions, please use the chat, please unmute yourself, or please raise your hand. We really are here to help and we want to get your input. So with that, I will move on to the mural board and share that with you. Wonderful. And as you'll see in the chat, Gerard has included the first set of questions, and now I have provided the link. So please let me know if this is working or if you're having any technical difficulties. Wonderful. I'm seeing you all joining the board. Okay. Awesome. So for our first health demographics question, as you'll see, there are a couple of Post-it notes here. Feel free to get started by looking at our directions here, but this is a health demographics activity. Essentially what we're trying to do is understand how this health data that Eric just explained of asthma rates, low birth weight, cardiovascular disease, what your experiences are. So we've divided it into different categories of overall health, asthma, cardiovascular disease, and low birth rate. So please, if you could pick a Post-it note and start writing. Wonderful. Thank you for participating. Interesting to have some of a little bit of a theme of when it comes to concerns with overall health and the not having preventative measures, that leads to the higher ER admissions rates. So that's a really good point and perspective.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I also had the same thought when I was looking at the data. I noticed that the ranking of like the caseloads were a little lower than the ER version of the metric. So I think that's a really, really good point.
Notice someone also mentioning for having poor access to healthy food. You will be very excited because soon we will have a mural board activity specifically on food access. And also being related to having the asthma rates, especially during wildfire season, it'll be interesting to have these like correlation, especially between environmental justice and the hazards element. Makes it really interesting how there's a lot of overlap and correlation. Oh, thank you, Carolyn, for adding the link into the chat. Sometimes it's hard when you join a meeting a little late. So awesome. Thank you all for participating in this activity. I have to say, very impressed that there are no chats and not seeing any raised hands at the moment. So thank you for participating. All right, Linda, you said that you're having a little bit of trouble with the mural board. Would you like to provide any comments either in the chat or to unmute yourself? Do you feel comfortable doing that?
There's probably the option also, Linda, of just putting your comments related to like overall health into the chat, and we'll make sure it gets put onto the mural board. It's not going to be fixed after this meeting. We can add. Yeah, just put your comments in there. Anybody who's having trouble actually navigating it, like me, you can do that, and we'll make sure that it gets added.
Perfect. Thank you, Linda. Yes, and thank you, Leah. I am going to add Linda's comment right now. Thank you.
Yeah, and if it's related specifically to asthma or other of the separate health impacts, just put that in there as well. We'll make sure it gets put under there.
Wonderful, thank you. If there's anyone else having issues, we're definitely willing to do the same for any. I'm easily able to add the Post-it notes over here for you. Interesting for the high smoking rates for perspective, and seeing a couple of themes for urban greening and also for greenery and trees and parks. We have a future activity tonight that has the park activity. Interesting for this comment about like kids not feeling safe and there being no low cost activity. We'll love to hear from you more as we go into that parks and access activity, and for you to be able to elaborate on that more there. Okay, Zachary, I'm going to add your couple of comments into the board activity, just, Zachariah. So Zachariah, when it comes to other public health concerns, we focused on a couple, like 3 of the main items that were really high levels for the city of Hayward. And then we're going to go into some other topics related to environmental justice, such as healthy food access, parks access, community engagement, etc. Yeah, great job participating in this activity. We have a little bit more time because I still see some activity going on, but if any of these things like are moving a little quickly, we'll just keep going through them because we have a few different activities tonight. Marcy, I'll add your comment about the interest in how these health conditions are spread statistically across income and educational level. Okay. And Linda, I'm adding your question and your comment in now. So I know you have still a little bit more time on the timer, but I'm thinking with the number of activities we have tonight and how many, like having the ability to continue working on this mural board activity, I'm going to move on to the presentation. So with that, you can keep working on this if you'd like, but we'd love to have you continue listening to us. And then if you have the time later on, you can continue adding to this mural board activity.
All right, great. Okay, let's talk about another fun topic. So this is the pollution exposure topic, which has a number of different metrics. So when we looked across at several metrics, these are the two that stood out. Diesel particulate matter and traffic exposure. So both those indicators were relatively high in the city. As you might guess, there was a strong correlation with both of those indicators with major regional arteries. 880 was, of course, stood out. Of course, well, a little bit to your north, but 580 as well. The census tracts that sort of overlapped with, connected with that, stood out. Interestingly, back to our previous topic, there was an Environmental Defense Fund study in Oakland from last year that associated asthma rates with diesel particulate matter. So you can kind of the reason that some of these metrics are all put together to try and give you a sense of what's going on. But definitely there were several census tracts that stood out on these two topics, and specifically the communities that are dealing with these issues were sort of the ones that were within proximity of the major arteries. So truck routes, highways, and things like that. And then below ground, specifically the industrial areas in the West had some pretty high percentile rankings in terms of groundwater threats. This is largely associated with leaking underground tanks, or leaking underground storage tanks, they're called LUSTs, and hazardous waste issues that have been noted and sort of cleanup sites, documented cleanup sites. So again, there was a little bit of separation where many of the issues may have not necessarily been in residential areas, but I do think there's some perhaps policy implications in terms of where development takes place and some things the city can do to sort of safeguard when new development takes place. But yeah, so those were kind of the key things that stood out on those two topics.
Sarah, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry, even the tech person can forget sometimes. So we will start the next activity if we're ready for that. I'm gonna give Gerard a chance to add the prompter in the chat. Perfect, thank you. And here is the link to participate in the mural board. Thank you.
And then just for Zachariah, who I think joined a little bit later, what we're trying to do with these mural boards is we're having a sort of technical presentation. Eric Vaughn is giving a technical presentation that's based on the Environmental Justice Existing Conditions Report, which is available online. But then we're trying to use these mural boards to get all of you guys to give us your lived experiences, what you've heard, what you've seen in the community, the questions, and what, the big concerns are around these various topics. So it's sort of like the grounding it in the real life is the purpose of all of these.
Yes, and I know this one's a little bit more complicated. So as you can see on here, we have two kind of options. You can participate in one or you can participate in both. But if you are trying to explain either a tremendous number of diesel trucks you see in a location or traffic, you're able to double click on these and you can change the name. We'd love to know if there's a specific name and location. It helps us to see it on the map, but sometimes just out of context of the map, it just helps to have a little bit of the name. And then in addition, or as an alternative, you can participate in the Post-it notes and explain either areas where you see a lot of these problems, particularly like diesel trucks, or if you see other sources of pollution in certain locations of the city. You can also use the Post-its similar to last time. So if the map's a little bit complicated, you can also participate in the Post-it notes.
I think you could also chat if you can't post on there, chat to us and we'll make sure it gets on the map or in the Post-its.
Yes, thank you for the reminder, Leah. Yes, we are definitely here to help.
Yeah, and one of the things that occurred to me as I was looking at sort of these two things, diesel and combined with traffic, was that idle trucks are often kind of maybe the worst case. So would be curious to know where the traffic issues and the diesel and where places where diesel particulate matter might be more highly concentrated. If people have any insights on those kind of issues, I think that would be helpful.
Looks like there's a lot of traffic locations, so I'll add a few more of the Post-it notes.
Everybody's always well versed on traffic. I can tell you where my pain points are. We didn't necessarily explain this map, but this is an official map of truck routes in the city. So trucks are permitted to sort of take specific routes, and this is sort of the official routes that truck traffic should take when it's moving through the city, both from a local perspective, local deliveries, but also traveling through the area. Just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Artie, I'm adding your comment into the activity right now. Wonderful. You're all doing such a great job participating in these activities. Really appreciate for getting a lot of perspective. Okay, great. I think we're probably at a good transition point, got a lot of perspective. As I said before, you're able to continue accessing this mural board after, even after this workshop. We're going to have it available for 2 weeks afterward. But just so you know, like, we're going to start transitioning just because we have so many activities tonight. But thank you again for all your perspective on this activity. So with that, I'm going to go into food access.
Okay, great. All right, so there is a federal definition of what's coined a food desert. And these are low-income communities that are living more than 1 mile from a supermarket or grocery store. And I know that's a very particular definition of food desert, but that's just sort of the standardized version of the definition. And this is a tool that's used to sort of address food access issues. So there's another metric that's used that uses a half-mile metric. Just to point out that per the federal definition, there are no food deserts in Hayward. However, there are neighborhoods that do not meet the half-mile standard, which may be of interest. And then I guess the larger picture is access to healthy foods isn't the only driver of nutrition issues or health outcomes. There's other reasons as well, but why people may not be, that certain nutrition habits are associated with food. So Mount Eden, Santa Clara, Tennyson, sort of were the parts of town that had the least access in terms of this metric. In terms of documented supermarkets or grocery stores, I should qualify. So here's the map. This is sort of how this looked. I believe this is the Healthy Places Index information that was used for this, to document this. So the ones in orange are the areas that did not meet the half-mile criteria. End lecture. Yeah, so we'd love your thoughts on these issues, and I think Sarah will explain.
So Gerard's going to add into the chat the like prompter for this one, and then I will provide you the link in just a second.
Sorry, just 1 second, having a lost the chat here.
Wonderful, thank you. So this question, we kept it more open-ended because there really are a range of reasons someone may not be able to access healthy foods. There's a question of if we're counting Food Max and Grocery Outlet as grocery stores. Eric, you might be able to provide.
Oh, sorry.
Do you know how like they define the like specific locations, like cutoff points for different locations?
They actually their points, their data points within the data. So I don't know specifically which grocery stores were in it or not. But yes, I would say the size of something like Food Max and Grocery Outlet should qualify, should be included. It's definitely possible the data set missed a place. So if you see an area and it looks like, well, there's a grocery store, sort of within that area, that community, then it's quite possible that the data set could miss it. I think given that this is a pretty urban setting, and there are probably several grocery store options around. And maybe I'm wrong about this. We're just kind of curious, what else? What else around this topic? What are some of the other reasons? Cost of food. I know cost of food is expensive in the Bay Area. I know nutritional habits play a role. Just kind of curious what people's thoughts are on this topic. And for those that may not be making nutritious choices, sort of what are some of the drivers of those decisions? And what are the issues people are grappling with, when it comes to food availability and food consumption?
Okay, great. Linda, I'm adding your comment into the board, just so you know. Marcy, if you're having issues with Mural Board, please use either the chat or the raise hand feature to be able to provide your comments. I'll add them to the Mural Board activity. Okay, great. Receiving a range of comments, whether it be transportation issues, having access with transportation, food related to schools, issues, whether it be housing insecurity, or like by working long hours or working multiple jobs, how that can impact your access to healthy food or the ability to cook healthy food. All right, great. I think we've received quite a bit of feedback, so just giving it another minute or so, and then we will move on throughout the activities. But you're all participating so well and so quickly, so thank you again for all of the participation. Great. Great, so I am going to move us on to the next topic, which is access to parks and open space. Definitely a very popular topic, so we'll get started on that.
Yeah, and this was kind of interesting. So citywide, you'll see on this next map, before we go to the map, you'll see that while it appears that there's a lot of open space in the city, I think it can be a little bit misleading because of population density, because of where people live in the city. So while there's a lot of green on the next map, statistically speaking, we found that 76% of residents live in underserved areas with respect to open space, active space, things of that nature. And that most of the parks and open space are located in the east or west, which will probably come as no surprise to you. Okay, so go ahead to the map. So as you can see here in the map, there's a lot of open space, of course, in the hills, closer to the bay. But within sort of the city center, central Hayward, South Hayward, the acres per 1,000 residents, which is the metric that we looked at, there's many areas, many communities that have limited options. Yeah, so this probably makes intuitive sense to folks on the call, and we'll launch into the next exercise. So we'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this.
Okay. Now I've just sent the link to participate, so. So similar to our first activity, we have a list of range of questions to be able to get your perspective, starting with general, like what parks do you like to go to and why? Is it close to your house? Does it have a play structure for your children? Whatever it may be. What parks do you go to and why do you like them? And next one, going to like which areas of Hayward have limited access to parks. As Eric mentioned, there's quite a range of data in terms of who has access and who does not, where and how there's a range of definitions for the open space and parks. And then, so please let us know if you have like general perspective of like locations that seem underserved or don't seem to have many parks. And then also when it comes to the data, there is an obvious location in the central and South Hayward. So are there parks there? Are they underutilized? Are there issues with the parks that make people not access them very often? So a range of questions. So we'll give you a few minutes to provide perspective. And once again, if you're having any problems with the mural board, please send a chat. Please raise your hand on Zoom. We really do want to hear your perspective. A lot of people, a lot of perspectives easily with parks and food. We all go to parks. We all try and eat healthy foods more or less. So we appreciate your range of perspectives. They are a little bit smaller, so I might move the sizing around a little bit. What was that, Eric?
I said, I want to know more about Mia's Dreamland Park. That sounds like a fun.
I was gonna say, I'm like, that does sound really fun.
That point about school campuses being open after hours, that's a topic that I've seen in many places. It's like one of the low-hanging fruits. So yeah, I think that's a really great comment.
Also always wonderful to hear for like the range of parks, like the different like needs they serve in your community. Very interesting for like a skate park, playgrounds, hiking. Love that someone started using the icon of fire and thumbs up. Great perspective. Linda, I'm adding your comment in now. Thank you. Okay, great. We have a little less than a minute left, so you can try and wrap up your thoughts on parks access. We'd really appreciate it. All right, general last thoughts, and then we'll move forward with the presentation. As I mentioned, these will be available after, here's time's up. So we're gonna move on. And as I mentioned, these mural board activities will be available after this workshop as well. So if you'd like to continue your thoughts, please feel free to do so. And we will move on to the last but not least important topic of community engagement. So thank you. Eric?
Great, thank you. All right. So given that there are many residents whose primary language is not English in the city, and this will probably come as no surprise to people here, but the top languages are Spanish, Tagalog, and Chinese within the city. Many areas of the city are considered linguistically isolated. So questions about community engagement. So this is some data, spatial data showing linguistic isolation. And there's a clear trend again in Central and South Hayward. There seem to be many communities where there's linguistic isolation, or the primary language is not English. This is in terms of like the ability to communicate and participate, public discourse, and help move priorities forward in these neighborhoods. This is one of the key challenges for sure. So one more exercise to talk about participation, community participation, in the public discourse and decision-making about how resources are allocated in the city.
Wonderful. I see that there are more like questions in the comments in the chat. If they were not originally included during the activity itself, I did want you to know that I will go back through and make sure that all chats are incorporated into the mural board activities. So rest assured that if I didn't do it during the physical activity a little bit later, that we will have a chance to add it shortly after this workshop this evening. So with this activity, with community engagement, as Eric mentioned, there are a range of barriers that can prevent participating in community engagement, whether it be scheduling conflicts, just not informed, or, for example, the linguistic isolation. So we would love to hear from your perspective. Also, just if you have examples of successful community engagement, we would love to hear it. Many of you did say that you're representatives of an organization. Have you found strategies that have helped you reach key stakeholders in the past? And also, like, who is missing from today's call? We really appreciate that you were all here in attendance, but like, do you feel like there are voices that are not being heard in this conversation that either we can follow up with, or that is necessary for us to continue prioritizing and engaging with as we continue on with this project, which will take place over the course of the next few months? We'd love to continue hearing a range of voices from the community.
I have a quick question, really quick, if
Yes.
someone wouldn't mind answering. Can someone remind me, is there translation services at all city council meetings, or do they need to be requested?
I will let city staff answer that question.
I'm not sure if Eric Pearson knows. Do you know Eric?
No, I don't. I know that back when meetings were all in person, I think we had translation services on a regular basis. I'm not sure what we're doing currently.
Well, what I can speak about are the projects that I know about. So I know that there was, back when we had some hybrid meetings prior to the last surge, and when it was requested, Mandarin translation services were provided, but it did have to be requested. Spanish translation, I'm not sure if that's just kind of always offered or if you need to request that. But we can look into it, or you can make the comment and put the question onto the board, and it can be something that can be communicated to decision makers. Like, this should be something that might be typical and just kind of not an add-on or have to be special requested.
Okay, yes, thank you so much. I was just curious about that, because, I can't think right now. Okay, thank you.
No, absolutely. Thanks for
I
asking.
will just add to, as far as I know with Zoom, it has to be requested. So I've worked on by request, and I've also had last minute requests where we haven't had a translator available. So I believe it has to be by request and kind of well in advance as
Yeah,
well.
at least like 72 hours, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on that question, what are the ways in which you make city council meetings accessible? Are there closed captions for every meeting?
Again, I don't like our Tim Loans, who kind of is staff and tech to those meetings. He would be able to answer those questions because I know that because they're televised, I think you can turn on closed captions. That's my assumption. But again, tech is not my strong suit at all.
No worries. Thank you.
But again,
Yeah,
making the comment in here and asking that question is what this is about. You know, what are all the ways that you know about that you can think of that we're not, you know, thinking of.
And I will say it's in the city's strategic plan for this coming year to, like, I think we know that there's a lot more work to do on this. And so to come up with a language access policy and figure out how to resource it. I think at this point, it's just a matter of resources mostly.
Great. Thank you, Mary.
And Linda, I wanted you to know that I included your comment in the mural board activity, and Marcy, I'm adding yours right now too. Wonderful. I have to say, I am completely impressed for getting through 5 mural board activities with a range of questions, tremendous participation, and we still have more than 10 minutes to spare. So thank you so much. I feel like it's a true testament, especially when seeing for the community engagement, you know, as the topic of conversation, just to be able to see that how many people are willing to participate when given the opportunity to do so. Marcy, I'm also adding your second comment. Just saw a recent comment about the feeling your opinion does not matter. That's definitely not often talked about for a barrier to engagement, but definitely very common, similar almost in many respects to voting. If you think that it does not count, that it can become a barrier to participation. Wonderful. And while we're still on the, I'm going to add one more comment from Zachariah. Oh, thank you. So since we're like wrapping up, we're getting close to time. I did want to let you all know, over the next few days, I will archive these comments, organize and archive, so there's no one like overlapping other comments. And then we'll have it cleaned up, and then we'll have the links available on the website. So you will be able to continue participating. You may not be able to have your original Post-it notes for reference. So if you need to take a moment to take a screenshot from any of the links tonight while they're still active, because I'm not going to continue cleaning them up tonight, just to let you know, just in case you're like, oh no, like went to access it 3 days later and in your comments not there. It's because I have archived the comments in order to just continue allowing for more room. We really don't want people's comments and Post-its like covering each other up. just for the sake of like equal participation and allowing the opportunity. So just wanted to give you that for context. And I believe with just a few minutes left, I will pass it off to Leah to finish us off.
Well, I wanted to thank you all for coming out. I think that, you know, I came and spoke to the Planning Commission and Community Services Commission, and Eric spoke to the Youth Services Committee. We went to all the commissions and committees, and some of the feedback I heard come out of those was, you know, why us? Why not everybody? Why not open it up? And as a direct result of that feedback, we did open it up. And so we're looking to you as leaders and to the people that you've invited into this space to participate and continue to participate. So please get the word out about this project, the housing element, the climate action plan, environmental justice. We're, you know, 4 staff people that are trying to go out in the evenings and weekends and on top of our jobs and get the word out, and we need your help to do that as well. And so, you know, push this out. We need to hear this feedback, especially with regard to community engagement, healthy eating. Like, what are some ideas out there? What are people doing? What is that lived experience? What parks do you like? Why and why not? And this is the stuff that makes the plans that we work on feel real and important to people, tangible, you know, can make a change. So thank you so much for making it to this meeting. We will have more meetings. This is just the first environmental justice one. We're going to have another one with the community. Then we're going to be taking all this feedback and the plans that come out of it, the policy recommendations to decision makers. You'll receive notifications about that as participants in this meeting. There's a housing survey up. Please take the time to take it. Pass it on to others in Hayward to take it as well. There's a climate action plan meeting coming up in April. There will also be work sessions with the Planning Commission and City Council in mid to late April about the housing element. So there's a lot of stuff to do, and we just love seeing you be here, Mary. Yeah, and I want to give everybody, like, we still have a few minutes, and I find it ironic that we talked about hearing your voices and we literally only heard like one person's voice tonight. So I want to, you know, give everybody a chance to sort of, you know, weigh in, give us your thoughts, takeaways, what we could do better next time. And Mary, you want to kick it off?
Sure. I think you guys did great. First of all, thank you for this. But I kind of had like a contextual question about, since this is the first time, so I am now understanding that the state is requiring this of all communities, and that I'm hearing that Hayward doesn't, according to the state's definition, doesn't have any disadvantaged communities. I imagine that probably means a lot of Bay Area cities don't have very many disadvantaged communities, just because we kind of mimic some of them. And so what might that mean policy-wise, like for the state, like since they've now set this as like they're requiring this document? And yeah, anyways, if anyone has any thoughts on that, I'm just curious.
I can take a stab at that one, Leah. Yeah, so it's a minimum requirement. It says the law states that if there's a community that qualifies under the definition, then the local jurisdiction is required to take action in terms of policies, plans, and goals to address the issues. Progressive communities that don't, in Hayward's case, there's a few that are sort of slightly below but close. And it's a proactive approach to take steps to address some of those issues. And I think it's really smart of Hayward in this case to be proactive in these areas, recognizing that not only is it, you know, by itself environmental justice an issue, but they're linked to all of the other things that the city is working on related to housing, climate action, transportation. You can see all these issues reflected in a lot of the topics we talked about. So in order to address equity effectively and all the other stuff, this is a great lens for tackling some of those issues. And that's all I'll say about it.
So funny, you can tell that I work for government, sorry, because I'm like, wait, I want to have I think it's good that we don't have disadvantaged communities, but on the other hand, I know that dictates funding. So I'm like, wait, I'm not at the definition. So anyway, sorry.
It's nice to be able to check that, like get some points on a grant application, right? You're like, Artie, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I guess I just maybe a little bit of a process question. I mean, I think a lot of us are here representing various commissions that work on some of these related issues related to housing insecurity, food insecurity, planning decisions. And so I'm just curious how this work is going to wrap into other work. I know on the CSC, we think about this a lot, like we have the information we have, and we know that it's not a standalone sort of effort, like the things that we do, there's many other things happening in the government. So I'm just kind of curious how this process, like, how are we going to see it like materially impact these other decisions and inform our work as commissioners? Like, you know, how do we make sure that we're not just doing our next thing in a way that doesn't, like, you know, concretely take advantage of the work you're doing?
I'll take a stab, but I also think Eric Pearson and Mary could weigh in here. So the general place, I'm going to just back up like super far. I'm going to back way up, and I'm going to say, like, so this, and Eric Vaughn mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's something called the general plan. That's the sort of like foundation upon which we build, like, you know, mobility and land use and all these other pillars of, you know, lifelong learning, community health, safety. Some of these are required by the state. Some of them communities elect to do, like economic development, or in our case, we're going to be doing environmental justice. I think that what our job as staff is, and your staff, so Monica Davis and others, you know, Jessica, who you work with, all the staff that you work with are going to be, you know, participating in and understanding what we're doing, and letting us know what you're doing will feed into our document. Our document becomes part of the general plan. So it's like pretty high level policy stuff. You as Community Services Commission, or the Planning Commission, or Keep Hayward Clean and Green, or, you know, all the different groups, Youth Commission, you're all going to have your programs and projects that you implement that grow out of the, like, sort of larger policy documents in the general plan, or in these documents that we're doing. It's sort of like, it's funny because, like, the housing element, I say, like, no one's actually really interested in the housing element because it's the last thing that creates housing. It actually doesn't, it's like the opposite of creating housing, but we have to do it. And it's sort of like, so what we'll try to do is capture the work you guys are doing. We'll try to, like, push it forward and capture some of these comments and things where you say, hey, we need to fill in more, you know, here, that's what these mural boards were about, right? And try to give you the ammunition and the tools and the backing to move projects forward. Oh, it's in our general plan. That's why we're doing it. It's not just some rogue thing, you know? So it is up to us as staff to make sure that the work you're doing does get captured here, and that it's not, you know, going to get lost, or that we're, you know, going in a direction that makes sense for the community. I'm not sure if others have, like Mary, you guys deal with commissions in this work all the time.
I see some of the people handwritten, so I'll be really brief. But I think, I mean, one thing that I've been applying for a lot of grants recently, and I think what this sets us up to do, like, I'll give an example for Hayward. We have the Let's House Hayward plan that you guys all, a lot of you probably know about, and that allowed us to apply for some, when the stimulus funding came in, we already had a plan. We were like, we've identified this. It took 10 years of advocacy and different work to get us to a point where we had a plan. And then when a funding opportunity came up, we were able to kind of take a big leap forward. So I see that being and then a lot of, like, state grants, you have to already have, like, a shovel ready plan before you can apply for any grants. So this is useful.
Sorry, Julie, I know you have kinds of, I guess maybe when requests, like, it would be nice to kind of maybe even have some prescriptive, like, you know, these are areas that this effort really helped us identify, food deserts or what have you. So that might also inform the more narrowly focused work that we do on our commissions, that, like, in ways that maybe are a little more prescriptive, I think could, you know, not to tell us you have to do this, but at least, like, actionable. Maybe prescriptive is the wrong word, but actionable, because I think sometimes it's hard to sort of go from the general plan to like the types of work that and decisions we're making recommendations as a commission on. So maybe that's a bit of a request, but
Got it. Thank you. We'll definitely, you know, the team is on here, and our next steps is to take all of this data and turn it into something that we'll bring back to you. So that's really good feedback. If we don't have any more to add to that, maybe we'll move on to Julie.
Hi, thanks, Leah. One thing that really struck me is you said, you know, for a lot of like this outreach, it's you and the 4 staff members, or I guess it's 4 of you total. And I thought, you know, what can we do to amplify the message? Because, you know, we all hear from people in the community that have total opinions on all of these things and where they think the pain points are. And you see a lot of it on Nextdoor. I mean, people have opinions and voices, and how can we sort of amplify what you guys are doing going forward? And maybe, I mean, kind of what Artie said, maybe part of our job as commissions is to give us some specific ways we can amplify that in the community, maybe through our work, or I don't know, I mean, some specific, like you each contact 5 people or something like that, because I know there were a lot of people interested in tonight's forum, and there's a lot of us here, but you know, I think there was really big interest going forward. And I mean, you know, leading up to this this forum. And, you know, I think it also has to do with timing, and everyone's so busy, they get caught up in their routine. So one thing I said was multiple reminders, you know, maybe a couple of different sessions, some during the day when maybe kids are at school, some at night, maybe on a Saturday, which I know is more resource time for you guys. But anyway, I don't know, you know, maybe sort of, yeah, just more direction, how we can help you amplify this message. Thanks, Leah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. I will send you all emails that you should please post. I am not allowed to post things on Nextdoor, unfortunately. I have tried, and they're like blocking me. What I would say is that one of the ways around the whole you know, having one single meeting where you have to be there is that we did record this. We're going to post it on the website. We're going to put the mural boards up for 2 weeks so people can, you know, participate. You can do a virtual participation, like choose your own adventure, take as much time as you want to do this. You know, we're posting the study on as well. So people who want to dig into that technical data that Eric Vaughn presented on and really want to drill down into those maps and the statistics, it's all in there. And so that's hopefully an opportunity like that. Those are some of the ways we're trying to get around, like, if you miss this meeting, you could still participate. But we appreciate you guys pushing this out and getting others to take a look at it.
Yeah, you know, the one thing I was going to say is when a grocery store closes down, like say Food Source and Mission Boulevard, you know, that one hurt. That, you know, what we could do to have people out there, billboards out there, ways for people to access, like why they're upset about that. What did they expect from that? What do they see as the solutions? You know, like going to the source of where people are hurting. I don't know, just thinking ways we could do it. That's all.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I see Jade's hand and then George, and we're gonna try and be respectful, also continuing of time. We'll just like, you know, since we have gone past the 8 o'clock time, if you have to like jump off, we completely understand. We'll stay on to talk. And also, as we mentioned for the website, please visit our website. Please contact us. Please be part of our email list. We really appreciate that. So definitely putting a plug to that for if people are jumping off. So Jade, you had your hand raised, but it looks like you lowered your hand. So I'm not sure you're ready.
And it was raised. Sorry. I just took it down so we could go ahead and move on. Thank you for staying after and kind of having this conversation. I did have a question in the chat, just kind of what are next steps for the group? Is there going to be another meeting? I know, Leah, if I'm saying it correctly, you shared that based on this data, you'll be sharing this with the city. I'm just really hoping that this information is shared with everybody that did sign up, just because I've had previous experiences where like I've participated in a similar work session like this around the golf course, to be honest. And I've done the same exact thing where I've participated and been in these meetings and I feel like I haven't heard anything. Or when I go to these meetings, they're like, yeah, we want to hear what you're saying. And then they're straight up like, oh, that's not idea because we've already thought about this and that. And I'm pretty sure that that's what we're going to do. But thank you for participating in this. And it just feels like, well, why, why do I, like, it just it hurts. I'm not gonna lie. And so like, I definitely like being in this space. I'm like, yes, like, please make sure that you're sharing this information. What are next steps? When is this going to be at a public meeting, at an actually in front of city council? So I know to come and like make public comment and speak on something that I care about and not feel like I'm kind of being dropped off the loop once you've heard like what I shared and what kind of data the city has collected, whatever they wanted. So they can, I just wanted to share that and express that.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll allow for other city staff members and Rincon to also be able to respond. As someone who works in engagement all the time, like that's why we have so many mural board activities tonight. Like we really wanted to ask as many questions as we could in a structured format so we can get a range of perspective on these topics, because we're at this point of transition from these technical background reports that are so data heavy and so technical, and now wanting to get this community engagement perspective of what your lived experiences are. And so that way we're able to channel it into the environmental justice element, especially when it comes to policies and programs. Like those are the drivers of implementing a general plan. And so, like as part of this process, like next steps, we do continue to have meetings in terms of the planning process. We continue to create the environmental justice element. There are workshops and surveys in conjunction with that, as well as hearings in order to adopt those those planning documents. So you will have a multitude of comments to make sure, like opportunities to make sure that if the comments are really not specifically addressed or not accurately represented, you have the opportunity to say so. And also, one thing that does help with planning and general plans and overall is that it's not a specific development project. There isn't this component of like, oh, there's someone, a private property owner who's investing in this and like going through those specific channels. It is trying to be as representational of the community in 20 years of planning into the future. And environmental justice is very much the key of community experience and lived experience. It can be very technical, but it's all driven through your lived experience. So we appreciate you being here tonight. Please visit our website, be on our email list. If you go through that channel, you'll be already added on. The fact that you participated, you'll be added onto our email list. So we will continue to contact you no matter what, whether you do it on the website or not. So just thank you for being here. And like, it's a multitude of steps. So appreciate the investment of all of you who are here tonight. But also letting you be reassured that there are like that multiple process. And like, that's why we have it in the planning process for the policies and programs to be reflective of these public comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Jade, we'll definitely, you'll get emails about next steps and meetings. This is a year-long project, so I will tell you that we'll probably have some big pushes, some additional meetings up until about May. And then we'll go quiet because HCD takes forever to review. And then we'll return in the fall and be holding some public hearings later this year. So it's a long process, and we will go dormant at times, but you can always reach out, but we will get in touch with you.
I'll make my comment really quick just because I know we're over time. But first of all, thank you for a wonderfully facilitated meeting. It went by really fast and I enjoyed each activity. I really liked what Julie said earlier, and I kind of wanted to piggyback off of some of the idea around community engagement. At the beginning of this meeting, we had a poll where we answered a few questions about ourselves. I'd like if we could add a question about which neighborhood in Hayward you're located in, because I just want to make sure when we zoom out and look at this data, we know we're getting answers from across the city and not just maybe small subsets. Because when we're talking about these different neighborhoods, I want to have hard data about who did the talking about those neighborhoods. And then kind of along the note that Julie brought up earlier about, leveraging the commissioners to go out. Some of those mural boards, I think, could be converted into maybe short questionnaires, and it would be great. I don't want to put work on commissioners. I'm just making up an assignment out of thin air, but I think it would be fun to equip maybe some commissioners or interested residents with those questions and allow us to maybe go out to a food source, for example, and find out on the ground what the barriers to entry are, what their issues are with their green spaces, just as a way of like remotely collecting that feedback. I don't know if there's barriers around that, legal issues around that. I'm kind of just spitballing here, but just ways in which we can pull folks in. is what's coming to mind. But thank you again. Those are my comments.
Great. Thank you so much, George. That's a really good idea. We have some other ideas for how to get out on the ground. That's what we're working on right now, going to markets and laundromats and places like that. And so using the idea of the mural board, maybe hard copy, sticky note, we'll definitely take that to heart and see if we can get some people out on the ground to do that. And we can share it with you as well, if the city attorney's office is okay.
All right, Linda. Okay.
I was wondering if maybe we could do a next door. I know you said they don't allow you to post on others, but couldn't the city have its own next door where the city is what's next door? So we look at a larger community and we're only posting those things that affect the city as a whole. So that people who are not going to go to just traditional social media would go to next door. Except it's not just your 5 blocks, it's the city.
Cities can post, but I'm not allowed. It's filtered, and so it's hard for me to do that. But you could post in your next door neighborhood and say this is a citywide project.
Absolutely, we could do it. I was just thinking of it from the
that.
city's perspective.
Yeah, I have to get it into the queue and try to push it through like a lot of people, whereas you guys have direct access. And I'll keep doing that. We have some stuff that goes out on, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and next door. It's but I think it is meaningful coming from you. And so what we'll do is we can send you a little blurb that you could copy and paste and put out and just let people know, what's happening.
We can definitely do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Any other hands? Okay, well, we did go a little bit over, but I think it was totally worth it to hear your voices and to, thank you so much for joining. It was actually really fun, and I agree 100% the time went by really quickly. And I don't usually say that about community meetings. And I was like, so thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your time.
Have a good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
night.